Liver damage. When the call came, James was halfway through his shift at the auto repair shop, hands blackened with oil, radio murmuring about weekend football games, and the scent of burnt metal thick in the air. He thought it was another telemarketer until the voice on the line trembled. "Mr. Carter, it's about your father." The world paused for a second. The hiss of the compressor, the clank of wrenches, even the faint hum of the lights seemed to go still. His father, Henry Carter, the stubborn, beer-loving truck driver who hadn't spoken to James in nearly 7 years, was in the hospital with severe liver damage. The words didn't make sense at first. Henry was larger than life, the kind of man who survived bar fights, car crashes, and heartbreaks. But liver damage develops gradually, the doctor explained, and sometimes, so does regret. James drove through the rain that night, the windshield wipers squealing as if scolding him for every angry word he'd ever thrown at his father. He remembered the last fight, James wanting to go to college, his father insisting that men work with their hands. Pride had done what disease later would. It poisoned them slowly, invisibly, until they were too weak to face it. When James arrived at the hospital, the fluorescent lights made everything look pale: walls, floors, faces. Henry lay unconscious, tubes in his arms, his skin yellowed with jaundice. A nurse adjusted his IV and looked at James with practiced sympathy. "Are you his son?" she asked. He nodded, unable to find words. "He's been asking for you," she said quietly, "before he slipped into a coma." That sentence cracked something open inside him. For years, James had believed his father didn't care, when he missed birthdays, graduations, his wedding, but now, seeing the frail man in the bed, he realized love doesn't always speak. Sometimes it hides behind silence, fear, or a bottle. Sitting beside him, James whispered, "Hey, old man, I'm here," his voice breaking, as if the words themselves were foreign after so long. The machines beeped rhythmically, a cruel reminder of time slipping away. That night, he stayed until the nurses dimmed the lights, remembering the smell of engine oil and cigarette smoke that used to cling to his father's flannel shirts, the way Henry would laugh, loud and contagious, after telling terrible jokes. Days turned into weeks. Henry's liver was failing faster than expected. The doctors said a transplant was the only hope, but the waiting list was long, and the odds were cruel. James met patients in the ward, some old, some young, each carrying the same fragile hope in their eyes. There was Maria, a single mother of 2, who crocheted little angels for the other patients, and Sam, a teenager who'd gotten sick after a childhood infection. Their courage humbled him. It wasn't just his father who was fighting for life, it was humanity itself, clinging to hope despite the odds. James found himself volunteering at the hospital, helping with small errands, bringing coffee to nurses, and fixing a broken vending machine one night just because a little girl cried when it swallowed her dollar. Kindness, he realized, was also a form of healing. One evening, Drive Patel, the transplant specialist, called James into his office. "Your father's condition is deteriorating," he said gently. "There is an option, though it's not easy. A living donor transplant. A portion of your liver could save him, if you're compatible." The words hit him like a wrench to the chest. Donate a part of his liver. To the man who'd thrown him out at 17. The man who'd chosen whiskey over family. James didn't answer right away. That night, he walked the empty hospital corridors, the floor cold under his boots, thinking of all the nights he'd gone to bed angry, all the mornings he'd sworn he'd never be like his father. But as he passed the pediatric wing and saw a mother asleep beside her sick child, her hands still gripping the little ones, something inside him softened. Maybe forgiveness wasn't about deserving, it was about deciding to stop carrying the weight. The test showed he was a match. When the surgeon explained the risks, James's wife, Emily, squeezed his hand. "You don't owe him this," she said, eyes full of fear and love. "I know," he whispered. "But I owe myself peace." The surgery was scheduled. The morning of the operation, James sat beside his father's bed one last time. Henry had woken briefly, his voice rough as gravel. "You shouldn't do this," he rasped. "You got your own life." James smiled faintly. "You gave me that life," he said. "I'm just giving a little back." Henry's eyes watered, and for the first time in years, he said, "I'm sorry, son." That apology, simple and late, was enough to mend decades. The surgery was long. Complications came and went. Both men survived, though recovery was slow and painful. The first time Henry stood up without help, the entire ward clapped. James joked, "See, you can't get rid of me that easily." They laughed, weak but genuine, like sunlight after weeks of rain. Over time, Henry changed. He stopped drinking. He started volunteering at a local support group for recovering alcoholics. When people asked about his scar, he said, "That's where my son saved me, twice." They grew close again, rebuilding years one conversation at a time. On Sunday mornings, they'd go fishing at the same lake they used to visit when James was a kid, only now, the silence between them wasn't heavy, it was peaceful. But life, as always, had one more lesson to teach. A year later, James began feeling fatigued. Tests showed a mild infection, his body was still healing. He was fine, the doctors assured him, but it forced him to slow down. During that time, he started sharing his story online, not about pain, but about forgiveness. His posts went viral. People wrote from around the world, some asking how to become donors, others saying they'd called their estranged parents after reading his words. The ripple effect stunned him. Compassion, he realized, doesn't end with the person you help, it echoes into lives you'll never meet. Then came the day that changed everything again. Maria, the single mother from the ward, needed emergency surgery but couldn't afford it. Henry, now working part-time at a diner, quietly emptied his savings to help her. When James found out, he was furious at first. You need that money for your meds, but Henry only smiled. You taught me something, kid. When you give, you don't lose, you heal. That line would stay with James forever. Years passed. Henry's health declined again, as old age tends to do, but this time it wasn't tragic, it was peaceful. He spent his last days at home, surrounded by family, sunlight streaming through the curtains. The night before he passed, he took James's hand and whispered, "Don't let the good in you fade." When he was gone, James didn't cry right away. He sat beside him, feeling the pulse of memory in the quiet room, realizing that liver damage had brought them both to life, not through pain, but through understanding. At the funeral, the small church overflowed. People Henry had helped, recovering addicts, patients, nurses, came to pay respects. One man said, "He saved my life without even knowing me. Told me his son once gave him a second chance and that everyone deserves one." James stood before the crowd and said, "My father taught me that damage doesn't define you, how you heal does." The room went silent, except for the soft sound of people crying. Afterward, as he walked out into the crisp afternoon air, James saw a little boy holding his mother's hand. The boy waved shyly. "My dad said you're the man who helped his dad," the child said. James knelt, smiling through tears. "I think we all help each other," he replied. Years later, James founded a nonprofit that helped organ donors and recipients share their stories. He named it Second Chances. Every time a new donor signed up, he'd think of his father, of the yellow hospital lights, of the night he decided love was stronger than anger. One evening, standing by the lake, now older and gray at the temples, James whispered to the breeze, "We did it, old man." The water shimmered in the sunset, and he felt, for the first time, that peace wasn't something you found. It was something you built, piece by piece, scar by scar, act by act. And so, liver damage became more than a diagnosis, it became a metaphor for life itself. That wounds, whether of the body or the heart, develop gradually, but so does healing. Each kind word, each selfless act, each moment of compassion is like a new cell growing where pain once lived. In the end, the damage doesn't destroy, it reveals how much we're capable of enduring, forgiving, and loving.